our own career will be disrupted as well by AI. Here's my thinking on this is if disruption is coming, I like to disrupt myself. I like to do it on my own terms.
Jin-san, I have been looking forward to this for at least a couple of weeks. I'm so psyched. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm especially thrilled to be here with you, Nick. You and I consider you to be a good friend, and always good to reconnect with a good friend. So I'm good. I'm
Uh,
great. I'm thrilled to be here.
how nice. Thank you. I feel the same way. You know, we've been kind of blessed. We've had like well over a decade of collaborating and working together and gotten to really know each other. And so, that's also one of the reasons I was really looking forward to this. You know, it's just what I found with these kind of podcast recording is that you really get to know the person even more because you have a block of time, with them. So let's kind of dive in. One thing I've always been like so impressed about you, Gene, is a couple of things. One is your journey, your career journey, and your life journey as well. And then also and I'm sure you'll get to this, like even like, your work within FedEx, overseeing all of this really massive, network infrastructure, and now overseeing kind of the massive security of this corporation. So you got both of those, experiences, which is really unique in the industry. But why don't we start with your journey? How you started, how you got to the States, and then your career path.
Well, some people have heard me talk about the story before, and I think my story, besides the personal side, it is also a personal testimonial of how a great country America really is. When you think about me as pretty much a first generation immigrant
Mhm.
coming from overseas and make it here and make it into America dream. So to answer your
Yeah.
question, Nick, actually, as many of you know, I was born in China, and
Mm.
I my parents were both doctors, pediatricians.
Yeah.
And when you think about my doctor, my dad, he was a research doctor and practicing pediatrician in the local university back in China.
Mm.
And he would do some research and so forth. So, when I was in my, I would say, junior year in college,
Mhm.
thousands of miles away from home, uh,
Yeah.
dad one day got a call from a doctor in Memphis. There's a very famous hospital in Memphis called St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital,
Yeah.
and the doctor called my dad and say, Dr. Sun, I just read this publication you did in this magazine, and that doctor in St. Jude said, I got this pretty sizable grant from NIH, National Institute of Health. We
Yeah.
are studying the same subject. Would you love to come to St. Jude and collaborate with me? And of course, that was in the early 90s.
Mm.
And that was for my parents, for my dad, that's once in a lifetime opportunity. So they agreed. And you can imagine back then in China in the early 90s, mobile phone is not a thing. Even
Right.
the
Yeah.
phone itself is not. So one day you can imagine my surprise. I received a telegram from my parents, a telegram. I'm
A
serious about that.
telegram.
In my university, and my parents informed of me their decision to leave China and left me some money and told me to behave myself while I was alone in China.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So mom and dad basically, in a way, left me in China and talk about Home Alone
Yeah.
in Chinese version in that way. So they came to Memphis. So my story continued from there was, I finished my undergraduate study in China and I worked 2 years in the Chinese industry back then. And one day I got another telegram from my parents from the States and told me it is my family obligation to reunite with my elder parents
Oh
in
my
the
God. Yeah.
States. So I made my journey from China to Memphis for the University of Memphis to continue my graduate study. So that's
Yeah.
the first answer how I end up in Memphis, Tennessee, all the way
Yeah.
from China. You can
Wow.
imagine me come all the way to the States. I could hardly speak much
Yeah.
English, and I can read some, but I could hardly converse or speak much English.
Yeah.
So I just put myself in the university environment and started to immerse myself into the culture as well as into the study and everything else.
Mm.
And once, it's about chance in life. Once I
Yeah.
graduated, finished my graduate program, there was an opportunity for the internship program inside of FedEx.
Ah.
And from there, I took opportunity to join FedEx, which is very common for folks
Yeah.
joining FedEx as interns.
Ah.
And I joined as an intern as a programmer, and I got hired as a programmer, application development programmer for our
Yeah.
e-commerce platform. And so that was my very abbreviated history, how I came to the States and how I joined FedEx.
Wow, what a great American story. That is really just like super. Thank you so much for sharing that, as well. Like that is really amazing to get the telegram that your folks have left, the country, and it's like, hey, take care. We're moving. I'm like what?
Yeah, that's still still a very recurring topic in my family dinner table to
I
talk
bet.
about rehash that event from time to time.
I bet. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But that's great. So that's how you got to Memphis, and then got into started your career like within FedEx. Great. So you started as a programmer, and then how did you go from kind of application development and programming, then into infrastructure? But kind of like what guided you within FedEx?
Well, first of all, when I started as a programmer, I think I have always have this curiosity about how business work and
Mm,
how the world work around it. So I have always been very technical person. I was an engineer by training. When you think
yeah.
about my education for my
Hmm.
undergraduate study as well as my graduate study, I have always been electrical engineering.
Yeah.
That was my training in the school. Then when I get into the FedEx, starting my first job as a programmer, I was a part of the e-commerce. When you think about FedEx, in the early 90s, when the internet was just burst on the line, and if you're old enough like me, you can remember internet back then was nothing but a large list of directories, links,
Yeah.
and you click on the link, you get the information. It was nothing interactive at all.
Yeah.
And actually, FedEx, when you think about it, actually made internet utility to begin with. And FedEx pioneered put a text box in there in our homepage. You can input your tracking number and you can
Oh yeah.
see where your package is. Made the
Yeah.
internet, we were the first killer usage
Wow.
in there to make the internet um, do something for people, make it
Yeah.
interactive. So that really, I was part of the team to make that happen. And that really made my mind wondering, hey, this is cool. This is making the e-commerce and makes everything work. um, to do that, I made a commitment to myself. I will really not only study the technology, but I will also commit myself to learn everything about the business, how the
Mm.
business work, and how does this whole logistic operation, everything else work inside the FedEx. Also, plus that, if you work for FedEx, you
Mm.
always know the famous story about how our founder, Fred Smith,
Yeah.
wrote that famous paper when he was in the Yale University and got a C grade for his paper of the idea of FedEx. So, I was curious how
Uh,
he from zero built this industry from ground up.
yeah.
So from there, I made a commitment for myself is you know, for me to expand my horizon, I really don't have to leave FedEx. I made a commitment myself. Every few years, I will move around inside the FedEx, seek
Uh,
new opportunity to expand my learning and my knowledge. So you can see myself career, even in my early part of FedEx career, I first was an application developer for
yeah.
e-commerce systems inside the FedEx. Then I moved to another group after 3 4 years to work on the applications for our salespeople. It's You can think about that as almost like an internal version of today's Salesforce. We were
Yeah.
doing our internal version of Salesforce for FedEx. 5,000 salespeople
Yeah.
strong, organization. We were trying to help them to do the automation of their tasks, help to do their automation of our sales lead generation. We will try to help them to do the automation of a contract approval and routing and all those things which being done. People
Uh,
come naturally in the Salesforce, right? Today, if you want those kind of capability, you just sign up for Salesforce. But in
yeah.
the late 1990s, it didn't exist. You as a corporation have to build those kind of things for that. So
Yeah.
to do to talk about this, my career inside the FedEx, probably one of the things is about move around to try new
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
So when you think about my now it's about 26, 27-year career inside the FedEx, I will say my early part of my career, first 7 or 8 years was in the application development, from developer to
Ah.
application architect
Yeah.
to application manager to running application development groups. That was first leg of my career to know
Ah.
everything about application development.
Yeah.
Then from there, I got my first chance into infrastructure and information security. Was the CISO back then was just starting the identity and access management. I think you can think
Ah.
about that. That was the early days when Enron blew up
Yeah.
and the SOX requirement is coming. So identity and access management, as well as for cybersecurity, is become a large issue. So I was
Mm.
asked to start the identity and access management practice inside the FedEx.
Yeah.
So I was chartered to do that. So I did that, stood up the identity access management practice for FedEx for a few years. So that was my first tour of duty for 5 6 years. Then, as me, not only it is my intentional purpose in my career to move around, try new things, to challenge
Yeah.
myself. Also, I'm very naturally get bored person. I get bored
I
for a
know.
certain area for too long. Then I move around. I think that's why I first met you, Nick. I moved
Yeah.
from the information security organization to run our global infrastructure. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
you can think about, our switch and routers, huge, expansive network. I
Yeah.
think that's my first involvement with ONUG and our great partnership back then, over
Yeah.
10 years ago. I would say over almost 12, 13 years ago, at
Yeah.
least, right?
Yeah.
For my involvement with you, as well as the support of the ONUG
Mm.
community. That was my, responsibility, because I was running the infrastructure for FedEx.
Mm.
Then coming back, I would say 2018, that's when I assumed the CISO role.
Yeah.
I mean, something happened for FedEx in year 2017. In
Yeah.
the July of 2017, FedEx was a victim of the NotPetya attack.
Yeah.
It was very public, and we were hit pretty hard. We suffered over $500 million in damage in our
Yeah.
European subsidiary of the NotPetya attack. Then soon after that, assumed the CISO role and basically to build information security program once again for the next chapter.
Yeah.
So that's my FedEx story in a little bit short version,
Yeah.
has never been a dull moment in my 26, 27-year career in FedEx.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, it takes, very brave, to take that CISO role, like after the 2018 event. So, so you also have like a hard spine, you know?
Well, it is, Nick, when you think about this, is we all people like, I'm sure like you or myself, we like tough challenges.
Mm,
We love to tackle tough issues, and I mean, I'm sure you're on the move all the time, and
mm.
in today's world, we as a human being, we want to fulfill our life's mission and life's calling. What's our purpose of life? It is to do big things, solve large
Yeah,
problems.
yeah. No, I'm with you on that for sure. And we have some big problems, like, right now. So let's shift a little bit. So you have this really wonderful amount of experience, going over the last couple of decades, like really 3 decades or so. So we've been focused around AI for the last couple of years. So maybe, and I'll tell you, Gene. So you probably don't remember this, but you were hosting. I'm not sure if it was last year. Yeah, I think it was last year. Yeah, it was going to be last year at the Dallas event, which is coming up. And I was on a call with you, and we were doing some prep. And I forget who else was on the call. And so we were talking about themes and and what we want to cover in the meeting. And and so we started talking about AI, and you had said this, and it was like AI will not replace your job, but people with AI skills will. I thought that was like just so insightful. So I've actually have a picture of you, and I've used this a couple of times with that quote, to the community. Everyone uses it. I was recording a podcast earlier today with a guy named Neil Anderson, CTO over at Worldwide Technologies. He brought up the quote. He's like, like we were talking AI, and he brings up the quote. I'm
Yeah.
like, wow. So anyway, so I'm not sure if you even remember, saying that, but I do, and it's like we've been kind of, attributing, giving you that attribution, around AI.
Yeah, I would just say, when you look at human history, I'm a history buff. I love
Mm,
to read history books
mm,
and look at human history evolution. I mean, when you think about the use our most recent innovation, when personal computer gets introduced, there was so much fear about PC will replace so many jobs, accountants'
mm.
jobs, lawyers' job, and so forth. When you
Yeah,
look back, of course, some of the manual repetitive tasks gets intermediate away, and it gets phased out. But those new technology actually opened up additional so many different other job opportunities for that.
Yeah.
When you look at accountants, for example, they are using computers to do their jobs more effectively than they did before, using all
Mm,
the paperwork and everything else.
yeah.
So I think look at the history it, of the human, chapter. It's always written by people who aggressively embrace technology, embrace innovation, and
Mm,
always, my new boss. I have a new boss, Shuram. He always talk about this nimbleness belief, and things will always work out. Of course, there are risks of the new technology and everything else,
yeah.
but the history is always written by people who embrace the technology and innovation. Also, there is I think, especially in my circle, in security circle and everything else, people always look at the downside.
Yeah.
What is the bad could happen? There's also another saying, I'm sure you heard about this, is about this as well, Nick. It's, the saying is the pessimists are always right, but the
Mm.
only optimists can succeed.
Huh. Yeah, I haven't heard that, but it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. All right, we're going to use that one too, Gene. That was good.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to focus us a little bit on kind of topics of the day in the industry and get your perspective. So, a lot of discussion around AI, around security, around infrastructure, its transformation around business process, business value creation, agentic, coming online. There's maybe let me put this into this perspective. So, David Sachs, the AI czar at the White House. All right, so David was talking about the kind of the exponential growth, of AI, and I thought he put it into really good terms, and essentially in an exponential equation, where you had three major components. You have chips, and the chips are increasing in performance between 3 and 4 times per year. And you can look at NVIDIA, like Hopper and Blackwell, and then Rubin coming on board. Then there's the algorithms or models, right? And so we've gone really from chat into reasoning models, and now we're moving into the agentic era, and that's also increasing in terms of performance and capabilities around 3 to 4 times per year. And then there's the AI data centers, or just compute in general, and those are that's also increasing 3 to 4 times per year. So that's GPUs and power. And so, what's interesting around that one in particular, you look at last year, we had the largest data center was Colossal, which is actually in Memphis, right? So it's about 100,000 GPUs networked, about 150 megawatts. That's going to 300,000 this year, and about 300 megawatts. And now a lot of folks are talking about kind of million to 3 million GPUs and gigawatt to 10 gigawatt, data centers, and these are massively large numbers. And then if you kind of look at those three components, and you put it into an equation, right? It's really just R sub one to the n, to the n, to the n, and then you really have R3 to the n. What you really get is that AI is at those kinds of growth rates. If they continue, which it seems like it will, that in 2 years we'll have 10 times the capacity. In 4 years, we'll have about 100 times the capacity. So, we're talking like massive amounts of compute and also massive amounts of power consumption. So, with that as a context, there isn't anything that is more disruptive, potential, promising, a little scary than AI. So, what's your view? How are you processing what we're all going through right now?
Well, you mentioned David Sachs. I actually watch that podcast, All In
Hmm.
podcast. Probably you're talking about All In podcast.
Yeah, I'm a
He
fan for sure.
clearly articulated that exponential, growth of AI, which you outline there. The second, you mentioned XAI in Memphis. Yeah, it's just down the road where XAI data center is being built and coming online for Elon Musk, and it's a great location,
Mm.
and by the way, we're helping them to ship those GPUs. Those are very important GPUs, and they need people to ship for them. So those are just a side note. And I will just tell you, I'll give you a very interesting use case with
Mm.
FedEx. That's, people talk about AI now building kind of those kind of infrastructure and looking for use case. And
Mhm.
but use case is emerging every single day. I'll first talk about use case in FedEx today, specifically very timely. When
Mhm.
you think about this, is you know just everybody, if you're not coming from Mars, you will know right now there's a trade war going. Tariff
Mhm. Yeah.
issue is top of mind for everybody.
Mhm.
And there's a specific issue is I don't know, Nick, you ever shipped international merchandise yourself?
Yeah.
If you try to ship anything across the borders, one of the things you are required to do is fill the paperwork.
Mhm.
Is what's your customer declaration? What's your value? What's There's one thing in there is called, doesn't matter what you do, you need to fill out a commodity code, harmonized commodity code. I experienced this. I'm embarrassed to admit to this. 2 years ago, I tried to ship a credit card for my cousin. My
Mhm.
cousin lives in China
Mhm.
and he lost his USA credit card. I was trying to ship his new credit card back to China. And for credit card, for the god of me, I just could not figure out what is commodity code, even though that has zero value to it as a
Yeah.
merchandise, but by regulation, you still need to fill out a code. There's a thousands of page of those kind of customer rules to figure this
Mm.
out. So,
Wow.
when you think about today, the shippers, small merchants, for example, from China, try to ship to USA. Direct model, use example of Shane or Timu, right? Those kind of example. When they
Yeah.
try to ship those kind of small merchandises, what kind of commodity code did you use for that? I mean,
Yeah.
just to fill out those kind of paperwork and everything else. So in FedEx, we're introducing the services for the shippers is we have an AI model in the
Yeah.
back. Just use those kind of natural language model to type
Wow.
in, here's what I'm shipping. Then the
Yeah.
AI model, based on those kind of human interaction, will give you, say, based on what you describe, we are about 80% certain. Here's the form you should fill out. Here's the code. Here's the parameter. If you tell us
Mm.
more, we will have the form and everything else ready for you. So
Wow.
that's AI as a concrete example today
Yeah.
help our business. And those kind of things will save millions of hours. Our
Yeah.
people struggle with those kind of importing and exporting business
Yeah.
to facilitate commerce and enrich people's lives. So,
Yeah.
I think so. To answer your question, first of all, Nick, one is the use cases are there. The
Yeah.
use cases emerging, just look at it in FedEx every single day. So I don't think we are pre-built where the infrastructure is ahead of yourself. Actually, I think demand, human beings, we as human beings, as a society, as a business, we as individuals will find all the use cases to consume all those capacity being built. And is that scary? It is.
Mm.
But it's also exciting for me as a business person, as well as for me as a individual consumer in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great example and a great use case. I wonder if we think about within infrastructure and maybe the life cycle management. So we have on the network side, there's the knock, right? And on the security side, there's the SOC. You know, what's your thinking around how AI might play a role there? You know?
Oh, I'll tell you, I saw a great use case
Hmm.
from one of the CISOs, peer CISO. I'm not going to name the company.
Hmm.
Nick, you work in the infrastructure area before. You know, one of the toughest area, uh, it's asset management,
Yeah.
especially for a company like FedEx, right? We have a millions of assets, digital
Mm.
assets. I mean, you need to know who owns the assets, what's the version of assets, how long has that assets been on the network, and how do you do the life cycle, right? To
Yeah.
do all the kind of things to keep the change, movement, and everything else, there's a term in our business called CMDB. To make
Right.
CMDB accurate has been an ongoing, never-ending struggle. I
Yeah.
saw a use case in a Fortune 50 company. They implement this, and which I told my team, we got to go there. We got to do it.
Yeah. Mm.
Today, it's very manual. Basically, I
Yeah.
have many contractors or employees look at the data and try to follow up with the people, and it's a never ending process.
Mm.
So today, this company, what they do is they create a AI chatbot, use Teams, Microsoft Teams,
Hmm.
to have those kind of dialogue with people armed with a fact base, with a
Oh.
big data in the background. For
Yeah.
example, if there's assets with IP address with that asset, um, um, with that address has no owner tagged. Because the
Oh.
first you got to find the owner, right? Who owns
Yeah.
that? Who's responsible for the assets? So
Yeah.
this chatbot will send the information, say, "Hey, so and so, Nick, we believe you are the rightful owner of this assets. Here are the reason. One, if the IP address, the last three digits 172, the one of the fact base will be because you are the owner of 171. That's one reason. Your
Um.
adjacency, you own the adjacency, IP adjacency of this address. The
Yeah.
second is we also look at log. You were logged into this assets just last week. So you had an
Yeah.
interaction with these assets. And
Yeah.
third, also from our previous conversation with another person, so and so, Andrea said, Nick probably is all as owner for this. So they created the AI chatbot with
Mm.
using Microsoft Teams armed with those data facts, a database, and continuously have those kind of chat conversation with different employees or contractors associated in the corporation to constantly 24/7 without human interaction to
Wow.
refine and chase down the asset ownership, refine, improve the accuracy as well as the fidelity of the CMDB. You can see where this goes, right? This is
That's huge.
huge. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's huge.
you cannot manage, you cannot improve, you cannot if you don't know who owns it. So
Yeah.
that's one of the very concrete example
Mm.
of how do we use AI as well as this kind of you know human language model based interaction model to improve our infrastructure as well as cybersecurity operation. I hope that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh, it does. Well, for sure. Like CMDB is like massively, complex. It's the larger the organization, the more devices that you have, and keeping track, of that has really. There hasn't been like a discovery protocol that is, multi-vendor and that touches everything. So the only way to kind of deal with that is put a lot of, people power, behind it. So like that's a great model. Actually, I haven't heard that before, where we can automate and query the owners of these digital assets and then keep that updated and keep it current, without having, an army of people doing polling like all the time. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And
Yeah,
then,
I mean the old model of even with human beings uh, using email model, there's a lag. Lots of people never respond to email. I mean,
mm,
they found with this chat channel, use Microsoft Team, use human language, as if you are talking to a real human being in the other end. They
yeah,
received 80 to 90% of the accurate response.
Yeah.
That was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Their
That's the
their accuracy of their CMDB database increased more than 300 basis point.
Wow. Yeah. I can imagine that because even like if you're doing emails back and forth, there are errors, and how people will collect that data, So, and I'm sure like once the data is collected with the chatbots, there's probably ways in which it does kind of correlation or checking accuracy, of is the data accurate? So yeah, that's a great use case. What about incident response? So the way that we've operated in the industry is we have kind of the haystack model, right? So all of the logs, all the incidents, they go up to Splunk or Datadogs or Snowflake or a custom built data lake. An incident happens, a cascade of events occur or alarms occur, and it's like throwing a needle in that haystack and telling the engineers, find the needle, go fix it. So that's ripe for change. That is a huge area where we can apply AI to improve reliability, improve the performance, improve the security posture of an infrastructure. You know, have you been thinking at all about that aspect or that use case?
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, I will say a couple things. One, it is, in this whole cyber world, we know for sure the attackers, they are probably the most innovative people there is.
Mm,
And we as the defenders, what we do, the attacker have a vote in there. And we know for sure the attackers will adopt AI tools and technology.
yeah,
That's that's given.
yeah.
Um, the second, I want to go back to FedEx experience with NotPetya. I don't know if I ever share this story with you, Nick.
Mm,
I think it's well established. NotPetya was because of a planted virus in this tax software called Medoc in Ukraine, right? So
ah,
when FedEx got attacked, we actually went back, did painstakingly reconstruct the timeline as well as all the forensics.
yeah,
So what we found out in the NotPetya Medoc days was the moment you can count that as T0. The
yeah,
moment when that patch of the Medoc software was noted in the patient zero of that laptop
yeah,
inside our TNT network in Ukraine, from that moment, Nick, within five
hmm,
minutes, over 50,000 PCs, laptops, and Microsoft Windows servers in our data centers were encrypted
wow,
worldwide. 5 minutes, Nick,
wow,
5 minutes. That's a
yeah,
velocity as well as a speed
yeah,
of the attack when that happens. Now go back to your haystack and the human in response model. Nick,
yeah,
no human being can respond in that velocity or
yeah,
in that fashion. So we have to go there in our response in what does the AI model in a careful, calculated, and responsible way be able to deploy automatic countermeasure in
yeah,
that. We have to go there. That's one of the use case I think a lot, right?
yeah,
Of course, we want to be very judicious in such way it is those countermeasures don't get triggered inadvertently causing outages or service
yeah,
disruption and so forth. But when the Armageddon or the large event happens, we need to have those toolboxes or capability in our back pocket because you go back to my ex- experience with NotPetya. besides the AI powered, agentic AI type of capability, how do you respond to an attack or spread, which
Yeah.
I just described, which we experienced in the NotPetya days?
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's beyond human scale, right? So it's like humans can't respond to that. And going back to the haystack, sometimes it takes hours just to pull the people together,
Absolutely.
to start talking about what happened, and by that time, like everything is infected, you know. Yeah, so I think that it's interesting, so it's really it's kind of bot versus bot, in this kind of AI era that we're coming in, or that we're already into, we're already entered into. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it
so
is.
you
When
it
you look at it, Nick, it is, cyber security is like a cyber warfare, and it
yeah.
has mirror into the physical world as well. When you look at what's happening in the Ukraine battlefield, it is
Mm,
drone versus drone. Whoever controls the drone, controls the battlefield nowadays. So
yeah,
the
yeah,
world is shaping, the battle is shaping. It's going to be, robots versus robots down the road. There's If anybody doesn't believe that, it
yeah,
is you will be left behind.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting too, with that, Gene, because the security response and the kind of the defense response, and how quick that has to happen. And there's also kind of a parallel on the network side of things, right? Because like what we're seeing is that, like, and I'm sure FedEx runs like a petabyte infrastructure. You're dealing with petabytes of data daily. You're just moving around in that infrastructure, and
Every
then
30
as
minutes.
every 30 minutes. Wow. Yeah, that's massive. That's a massive amount of data, and I think it's like, as AI becomes more ingrained in both the applications that it's supporting, and also the places where it's going, kind of closer to the edge, very different kind of traffic patterns are emerging. The way that kind of this infrastructure has got to respond is really, its job is to kind of move data around, and to create and orchestrate paths for that data. And those paths can't just be on old parameters like least hop, or looking at your neighbor, peering into your neighbor. They've got to really be more around what's the security posture of that path, what's the latency requirement of that particular application, a whole range of different parameters, so that that data can now move from an application to a storage, or data from storage to the application to serve the user. So I think that's got to happen, in machine time. That can happen in people time as well. So all of the transactions and the management of this infrastructure on both the security side and on the networking side is getting accelerated. The change management there, is getting accelerated. And I think the only way that clearly we can deal with that is through machine learning and through also AI. And so, you gave a really great use case around the response, but I think we're also seeing that around traffic patterns, and how kind of a network becomes an exchange of data, and being able to kind of service that movement of data across a really large infrastructure like FedEx's.
Yeah, I mean, uh, in FedEx, for a large and a complex network and infrastructure like FedEx globally, when you think about our scale for FedEx, we 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 operate into over 200 countries around the world. Wherever our package goes, our digital network goes. We have
Mm,
over 6,000 locations worldwide, and over 150 million active online customers interacting with us on a daily basis. I mean,
mm,
that's just a scale we are dealing with on a daily basis. Ship over 220 million packages per day,
mm,
and and that scale, um, you know, if any of the network interruption or reliability issues or cyber incident happens, to triage, to connect all the dots, to bring all the signatures and all the fact base and everything else becomes finding the needle in the haystack,
Mm,
and to reconstitute the services becomes almost impossible job in the short duration of time.
yeah.
So go back to your point, Nick. I think for the networking services as well as for cybersecurity, we need to be. I personally believe we need to be aggressively lean into the machine learning, lean into the big data, lean into the AI capability. I think I have this prediction about the whole industry.
Mm,
It's the network management as well as for the cybersecurity management moving forward. You will be based on in the future will based on what is a normal look like, establish normal pattern. What is a
yeah.
normal look like? What's a normal network traffic from drop to
Yeah.
drop, from hop to
Yeah.
hop? What is a normal security posture look like from all my network nodes, all my
Mm,
hosts and everything else? Then combine that with big data, machine learning, and AI. If any un- abnormal behavior or flag surfaces detected not by human but by algorithm, by machine, by AI, there
mhm.
need to be some kind of either flag be raised up or either be countermeasure or remediation must be deployed. Those are
Yeah.
the things we need to design and go into this brave new world. We're
Mm,
not there yet. I know lots of people will be very nervous going to almost like let it go of this paradigm, right? Let it go.
yeah.
I mean, I know many of my security practitioners or some of the network engineer you deal with probably will feel very threatening as well as very uncomfortable of this let it go. But I
Yeah.
think that's a world we have to get in there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and also to like make that point is important. Like we just finished doing a poll of the community, and so and the question was around impediments, to kind of moving forward, and it turns out to be um, trust of the technology is kind of small, but training and skill sets is the big issue. And so I think part of that training and skill set and also the trust, if you combine those two together, I think it goes exactly to the point that you're talking about. It's that you're kind of a little bit afraid of what this future, really is. And so you've really got to start to lean in and to like dive just like how you treated your career. It's like you always wanted to learn and to go into new areas so you can learn about the business or learn about various different aspects of how the infrastructure was working and the applications were working. And the same thing I think with the folks who are doing the kind of the management side of both that infrastructure, both networks and security as well. They've
Well,
got to.
yeah, that's one area which I focus a lot on. It is this upcoming AI era, and how do I, as a leader for the organization, uh, would think about as well as successfully execute this organizational change management (OCM). It is to engage with the workforce, with the team members, and make sure they see the future and they are become uh, part of the stakeholder moving forward,
Yeah.
and to have the support of the organization, support of the team. And I think once you embrace this technology, human activity, human judgment, and human creativity can never be replaced by AI models.
Mm.
At least not in my lifetime. Let me qualify that way, right? And and
Yeah.
uh, and I think it is when you look at a long history of human lives, we have those kind of technological disruption all the time, and there
Yeah.
were always gloom and doom and fear
Mm.
in those introduction of the years. I was last year I was watching, a TV show which was fascinating on the Paramount called 1923. I think it was a
Ah. Yeah.
prequel for Yellowstone. It
Yeah.
was detailing the change as well as societal change in the 1920s,
Yeah.
introduction of the you know uh, utility tap water and
Yeah.
the cars and everything else. You probably watched that show as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
I love
there
it.
were lots of
Big fan.
society upheavals.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And I that point didn't go unnoticed. There's no doubt. It's like the advent of cars and refrigerators, electricity. And kind of the life of now luxury, which is like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like well, compared to what they had to deal with, it was definitely luxury. But like there's no doubt. I think every generation, whether it was the industrial generation, the information industry that we all participated in, the internet revolution that we participated in, as well, has come with both its promises and its fears, and this is no different. This seems to be a much bigger deal. I think it has potentially, it has a much bigger change element, in it. Like I can see a world where the structure of corporations are totally changed. Like, right now, for example, like our system of records that we have like, SAS and SAP and, you have manufacturing, engineering, sales, HR, they have all their system of records. And those are basically SaaS products, and they're like one size fits all with a million features, and you pick like the 20 features that you need. I see that market going away in this next 5 years, or being really just totally changed, where we can move to an agentic model where we can actually now customize how we need our IT to run and for to deliver, the business value that we're looking to create. So I think I think those are big kind of disruptions, and I think going back to like what we both heard David Sachs talk about, like once we have a large amount of or a group of like data centers, AI data centers that are that big, then to me it's like a black hole. It's like it's going to suck in lots of other IT applications and features and services. So I think the entire world that we were used to around how we automate and how we kind of digitize our corporations is about to have a fundamental change. I think the biggest gate to that change is the point that you raised, Gene, and that's around skills and around training and people being able to embrace it or not embrace it.
Well, I think that's a very important point you just made, Nick. I think, here's how I would articulate this. It's you describe SAP and all those companies. I think the word is disruption, disrupted. They
Hmm.
will get disrupted, right?
Hmm.
They will in the marketplace, and I think the come into the profession of network infrastructure, network profession, which you you and I deal with a lot in our own days, as well as the cybersecurity profession. The profession and the practice will be disrupted by the upcoming AI era. There's no doubt
Yeah.
in my mind. I think everybody
Yeah.
saw that. Then coming down to the individual human level, what we do, our own career will be disrupted as well
Mm.
by AI. Here's
Yeah.
my thinking on this is if disruption is coming, I like to disrupt myself. I
Wow.
like to do it on my own terms. And that's what I told my leadership team, my officers. When we said we're going to make change, and let's instead of somebody do it to us. Let's do an open heart surgery ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's disrupt ourselves. I
Mm.
think that's paradoxically that's right thing to do, but it's so hard. It
Yeah.
is very hard to have that mindset. It is I'm going to get out of my comfort zone because
Yeah.
human beings, we are creature of routines. We
Mm.
have our routines and we are very comfortable in our routines. When the disruption comes, that means you have to establish, learn, and establish a new routine. So
Yeah.
that's my whole philosophy, and that's how I look at this upcoming disruption. Disruption is coming
Yeah.
to the whole society, to the industry, to us personally. And you know what? I'm going to embrace disruption, and I'm going to disrupt myself.
Yeah. I love that because it means you're taking control, and you're going to like, if you're taking control, then you're kind of guiding it, versus it happening to you. You get to really kind of take all the parts that are really effective and good in it and then utilize it for a purpose, whether that's a personal purpose or whether that's an organizational purpose. I think that's a really strong message. That's a great message, Gene.
Yeah, I mean, I think I, as a leadership for the certain organization, it is to have the trust in our people and to give them the tools and opportunity to learn new skill sets and to try new things. That's my promise to my team along this journey. And but in
Yeah,
the also in the meantime, this whole AI, has a lots of promise, but also, while I talk about my bias of aggressively adopting this in the meantime, but also there's a responsible side as well. It is to
yeah,
make sure AI is properly introduced and inducted into our business. Use my
mm,
example, Nick. I talk about that trade tool use AI to help customers to fill out, custom forms, declaration, and everything else.
yeah,
Once majority of my FedEx customers start use that tool, then that AI model itself becomes the crown jewel for my business. My
mm,
business operation depends on it. Then
yeah,
how do we safeguard that AI model? How do we make sure that AI model is resilient? How do
yeah.
we make sure that AI model doesn't hallucinate and
Right.
produce a wrong result to my customers with a
Yeah.
high degree of confidence? Those are the guardrails we are really starting to think about. How do we put into places?
Yeah. That's great. Awesome guardrails. Gene, this has been so great. I've like really just so enjoyed chatting with you and just hearing your insights and also like, being able to kind of track your career, over the last, decade plus has been a real treat, for me as well. So I want to
Well,
thank you, for spending the time.
Well, thank you, Nick. I know, I think ONUG has been one of my best platform, and I'm a strong believer. I'm a badge. I have an ONUG badge, wear tattooed on my body in a way, and I think this whole industry from a practitioner, for us as a consumer, banding together and voice our concerns and our hope and our desire versus purely from a sell side perspective, it's
Yeah.
extremely valuable. And I do congratulate all the success Nick, you and the ONUG team have achieved for the past, I would say, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And what a journey.
It's been, well, I'll tell you, Gene, thank you, for all that. You've had such a big role, in it, as well. It's like the work that we've done, especially on the CSNF, work. So like really around first multi-cloud, security notification, system, that was put in place in the industry. It's an open source, project. But I think even besides that, I think really what you did is that when you took on the CISO role, you really brought security, into the forefront. And now it's like half of the audience now is actually it's around third. It's third are network engineers, another third are security engineers, and the other third are cloud. And the AI roles they're not like separate, but it's almost like these folks are now taking over or they have to assimilate kind of these AI roles, and or AI is like modifying their roles, So it's a real actually this is one of the most, if not the most exciting periods within the community because there's so much change and there's so many questions on what's the direction forward, and how do we kind of mitigate a lot of the risk to move forward. And I think the only way to, or the best way to do that, is to learn from peers and hear from peers. And I think that's the the nerve that I think we've tapped into. So
Well, thank you, Nick. Good luck, and I will still stay engaged with you guys, and come here as a large supporter of the ONUG in the future as well.
awesome, Gene. Thanks so much. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you, Gene.
I enjoy the conversation. Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for plugging in.